that we are forming the institutions and the norms and the social structures that might define the next 1,000 years
Hmm.
of human experience. Because I think there's going to be a pre-internet and a post-internet human experience. Like the way the Victorian age feels to us now is what anything from the 1980s and earlier will feel like to the world from now on.
Hey everybody, welcome to For the Record, a casual, mostly unedited conversation series presented by Grey Matter, where we talk to music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. I'm your host, McKeegan Voice. Today, on episode 40, I spoke with Yancey Strickler. Yancey is a writer and entrepreneur. He's the co-founder and director of Metalabel, as well as the co-founder and former CEO of Kickstarter and co-founder of the artist resource, The Creative Independent. He's the author of This Could Be Our Future, a manifesto for a more generous world, the editor of the Dark Forest Anthology of the Internet, creator of the philosophy of Bentoism, as well as the record label eMusic Selects. Yancey's career started as a music critic writing for Pitchfork, Spin, and The Village Voice. And we chatted about the state of music journalism, as well as post-individualism, and thinking about our impact on humanity on the scale of millennia. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Yancey, it's really great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, as always, like to kick this off by going, back to the origins and hearing a little bit about you and where you're from and, when your relationship with music first started.
I was born in the U.S. I'm American, in Southwest Virginia, and grew up in the country outside of a college town. And that brought with it a mix of, it's near where bluegrass really came from. The Galax Fiddlers Convention is not far away. So there's a lot of that music that's present. And then because it's a college town, there were also great record stores for me growing up that were very important to my life. But music starts with my father. My father is a lifelong musician, not professionally, just, out of love, making folk music, making country rock. While I was growing up, he was always in bands. Band practice would be in our house, which was tiny, and somehow I slept through it as a child. So just like very present, and was sort of forced to learn guitar by him when I was about 7. I hated it. But I think when I was maybe 12, I started to love playing guitar for the first time. But on a weekly basis, my father would sit me down the couch and just play records for me for hours. And it honestly felt a bit like punishment because I didn't really want that experience. And it was just him constantly saying, just one more, as he would trace a song, back farther and farther till I hear 15 versions of Mr. Bojangles so that we can agree that the Jerry Jeff Walker one is the best. And of course, as a, other than the Beatles, as a teenager, I resisted many things that he liked because I had to carve out my own taste, and then later came to appreciate. And now we meld on a lot of things, still talk about music together often. But yeah, music was just, in a way, it was being put in front of me as maybe the path I'm being most encouraged to pursue in life. I would say there's no more encouragement in my life from my family around anything more than music.
Cool. And yeah, I'm curious. I mean, once you hit the and you came not to hate playing guitar anymore. I mean, did you pursue it more seriously? Did you end up playing in bands? What happened then?
Yeah, it was learning Blackbird on guitar. It was like the first time I had fun, first time it was fun and not rote. And yeah, I played music with friends, never really had a band. There were 2 summers where me and a friend made albums. We would make cassettes and do used a 4-track and made a I still have a cassette. It's 2 hours of, like, a fake radio show with us making up songs and, lots of that. In college, played with some guys a little bit, but I was never my musical taste went indie rock
Mm-hmm.
in, say, starting 92, 93, and I I was really taught to play in, like, a folk, country, bluegrass, just acoustic guitar style, and jumping to open tunings, jumping to all like, I just had no idea what to do, and so
Mm-hmm.
I reached a point of I wasn't able to make music that I liked a
Mm.
little bit. That changed a few years ago, actually, was when that finally changed, but it just made music then more something that I would play just as, like, a thing to do with my hands, as something I just liked, had no purpose other than, almost a meditation. Um, but it was always seeing music. Never really longed to be on the stage, really. I think I just loved all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that resonates. Just this sort of inherent desire to be close to it, even if there isn't, a longer term goal attached to it. Yeah, and I know that you kind of started your career by continuing to stay, close to music by writing, about it. Um, yeah, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and then, that's come up more recently in context with like, yeah, just if you could connect it to like the current state of music journalism a little bit, which has not gone, in a positive direction since you first started writing about it.
Are you blaming that on me? That's no. Well, just to like
Indirectly.
trace,
No.
yeah, okay. Just to trace a
Yeah.
little bit of the through line, because I think it's interesting. But like I mentioned, getting into indie rock when I was,
Mhm.
maybe 13. Part of that was definitely post Nirvana, and uh, or, I mean, really, right when Nevermind. I mean, that was amazing. And there's a record store in town, the Record Exchange, that I love to go to, and I always liked the people who worked there. And and there was someone named Butch who I always loved talking to. Butch was a great guy, so friendly to me as a kid. And I just bought whatever he liked.
Hmm.
And he liked The Fall. He
Oh, nice.
liked, Archers of Loaf. He liked some Japanese noise psych records. And I would just buy things that he liked because I liked Butch and I wanted Butch to like me.
Mhm.
But I didn't actually like the music, or maybe like could be up to a year,
Hmm.
honestly. That like once a month I'm getting something in his recommendation, I'm taking it home. I don't know what to do with it. I did not know what to do with Marquis Smith. But Butch is great. I trust Butch. And then he eventually got there. I think it was like Archers of Loaf maybe helped get me there a little bit, but started with just kind of admiring someone. And we have since become friends.
Hmm.
He ended up living across the street from my family later. We're still in contact. He runs a great label, Squealer Music. But that was sort of this window to follow. And then I was always a writer, and I went to university, and there I worked at the college radio station and did those things. And then in '99, Pitchfork had launched the year before, and I was reading, Addicted to Noise, SonicNet, these different music sites that were up in the '90s, and Pitchfork had just launched the year before, and then they put out their first call for writers.
Hmm.
And so I applied. I wrote and applied, and Ryan wrote back, and yeah, they like sent me some CDs to review, and I did 3 reviews for them. And after that, they were like, we think we're good. We're filled up with your context. I wrote a review that wasn't very good, a 4th one that they spiked, and then they're just like, nah. But that was very exciting, being in the college radio promo,
Mhm.
just the slew of things coming in. I can remember the day Nutrimilk Hotel on the Airplane Over the Sea came in, and,
Oh, yeah.
put that on to flip through songs just to see what's on there, and hearing Holland 1945 for the first
Yeah.
time, just being like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah.
And so
Excellent.
all those sorts of things, and that, and I was fortunate to then have a professional career lead me in that direction for a while of continuing to stay on that path.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more if if you could share, about your professional career as, to the extent that music has continued to be a guide, for your career.
I moved to New York after school and kind of 48 hours notice, not having a job, ended up applied for a job that was in the New York Times classified, and it was to transcribe interviews for like a radio station news service.
Mm,
And it was later bought by Clear Channel, but it was a
mm,
news service that would aggregate interviews with musicians and radio news for DJs to read out on the air. And so I became a staff writer there eventually, first transcribing interviews, just production work, and then a staff writer. And I did that for, I guess, 3 or 4 years. And it was all writing about things I didn't really care about. I was writing about new metal. I was writing
mhm,
about, just like whatever was pop in the early 2000s. But the job was you had to twice a day go through all the news wires of everything entertainment related. You had to go to every artist's website of any artist who was in like the top 200 of any chart ever just to see, did Moby update his blog with something today? And you go through everything and you pull out every possible news story.
mhm,
And I would send it to my editor. And my editor was a former New York Post editor. And out of that, he would assign me my first 7 pieces of the day. And
mm.
then I would have to write a 50-word blurb that for a DJ to read out on air that would tell the story of this news. And it always had to have some kind of pun in the title. That's another rule.
Oh, amazing. I love that
And
exercise.
and so there was a morning run and then an afternoon run. You did it again in the afternoon, go through the same sites, all the wires, and do your evening stories. And so every day was 14 stories.
Wow.
And it was fantastic. Yeah, I loved that job. Loved that hard job, loved that job. Like
Mhm.
having an editor, learning to sift through what's interesting. There's an adage he had that has always stayed with me. He said, "There are two types of stories. There's oh shit stories and there's no shit stories." He's like, "Never write a no shit story.
Yeah.
Just things people already know. No one's gonna care. You're always
Yeah.
looking for an oh shit story."
Mm.
I think there's wisdom in that. And then while I was doing that, I started freelancing. I was freelancing for All Music Guide. I wrote so
Mm.
much for All Music Guide when that was really the most important thing in the world. Um, Various web magazines, many of which no longer exist, many alt weeklies, and places like the Village Voice and Spin and Teen Vogue and New York Magazine. I sort of started inching my way up little piece by little piece just because I was such a deep fan, always listening in the I Love Music message board, maybe one of the most important things in my musical journey. And just all I cared about, just lived, dreamed, slept it, and had a CD collection of like 2,500 CDs, something like
Oh,
that.
nice.
And then during a period, I'd gotten laid off from that job. I was unemployed. It was tough. It was like post 9/11, and I ended up having to sell my entire CD collection to pay for a root canal because I didn't have
Damn.
insurance.
Oh,
It was aw
no.
it was crushing, it was crushing. And, but yeah, but, like, and then during that time, got a job at eMusic,
Mm.
which had been the first digital download store, had been bought then by a private equity. It was the first subscription service, first MP3, first subscription service, then bought by private equity, and they were relaunching it with a focus on indie music, not because they thought that was cool, but because that was the only one who would license their music to them. And then an editorial focus to help contextualize it. And I was brought on by Michael Azerrad, author of Come As You Are and Our Band Could Be Your Life. And then spent years there building out an editorial operation, writing, reviewing records, also starting a label there. Had the idea that we should start our own label because my colleagues and I were going to see bands every night. And that time in New York, you go to house shows, house parties, and Bushwick or wherever, people are selling a CDR with no cover art for $5, $10. And I would
Mm.
always buy those, and they're great. I mean, great. And So it's like, let's start just putting these online, and let's
Mhm.
make a digital only label where they just simply license us the right to sell it online. That's
Mhm.
it. They retain full rights. We take no cut. And hey, it's a reason to subscribe to eMusic. It's a way that we can help out these artists. We got a bunch of those records, Pitchfork reviews, but like we put out, the first Hooray for the Riff Raff record,
Oh,
put out the
nice.
first single by Girls, did a early thing with Best Coast. Our first release it was this group High Places, who I always loved, another band Breathe Out Breathe. And every month we put out 1 to 2 records. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It really maybe a crystallizing story that actually leads to where I am now is there was a band called the Rural Alberta Advantage,
Mm.
great band, and they had made a record, um, such a great listenable record, and did really well on eMusic. It got a great review on Pitchfork. People listened to it a lot, downloaded a lot. They ended up getting a check for something like 60 grand
Wow.
was what they got for like whatever several months of sales and
Mhm.
transactions. And meanwhile, Saddle Creek, Sub Pop, all these other big labels were interested. And we ended up, me and the band, there's this one South by Southwest where they did the Play 12 showcases and everyone's seeing them, and and they're trying to decide. They have multiple offers, trying to decide should they sign with someone. And one thing that was clear as we were looking at the deals is that their current arrangement, the way they were directly selling music, they would make more money that way than any of these other paths. Like that was clear, and they were building their own fan base. But being on Saddle Creek, which is where they ended up signing, that allowed them to say to their families and to their significant others, like, this is real.
Right.
This matters.
Right.
And it was that they were being legitimized and validated, and that
Mhm.
there was an economic need that they had to cross. But when given the choice, it is the choice of legitimacy and
Mm.
a feeling of my energy has not been wasted. That was most important.
Right.
And I mean, they just played a Bowery Ballroom a little bit ago. I mean, they're still out and about, but like just watching their decision making and then just being good friends with them and just seeing how they came at it was just really, I've just never forgotten about that moment and
Mm.
just seeing what the logic was and felt like there was a real truth in that.
I love that. So that was approximately what year when that happened?
That was probably 2007, 2008.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because all of these narratives and success stories about like owning your audience, and I guess that was like early Spotify. Or
Not Spotify yet.
not even like the birth of Spotify in Europe was happening at that time. So it's
That
weird
was
now
still
that we're
MySpace.
right,
MySpace was still one of
right,
the dominant platforms, still for music.
right.
It was
Yeah.
on the wane bigger, but musicians ruined MySpace. All the thing that they really did, they really did. Musicians were so spammy
Mm.
and so over the top. It was, yeah, sorry musicians, but yeah, you ruined MySpace.
Hot take.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, no, what I was going to say is, these narratives continue to be like really important and really resonant today.
Mm.
And, I know, or at least, they seem through, through your writing, through, the words I've, heard you say and rally around, continue to inform your work of, ownership and like releasing art and being part of a collective in which grants you as a creator and more leg- legitimacy, in the creative world. Um, yeah, and I'm curious, like how, I guess, again, like using music as the lens, how that through line, has continued to persist through your work at Kickstarter and then like on the Metalabel. If you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that certainly there are definitely through lines. I find most through lines you don't see while they're happening. They're all narratives are retrospective.
Yeah, yeah, you
I
need
think
space.
living narratives are like lies we tell ourselves, and
Hmm.
reflective narratives are like, oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what was happening for me. But I would say I don't know that I thought about ownership as something that people need. I think about it as I am very emotionally relate to what it feels like to make something that you I don't even know that you have a feeling about,
Mm-hmm.
and the fear in that, all the sort of twists and turns you feel inside of excitement, anxiety, and I just wish for people to get what they need in those situations. I want everyone to have their ego be satisfied enough that they don't have to listen to it anymore. I wish that for every artist,
That's
like,
a good way to
let's
put it.
just get you across that line so you can just relax and say what you really want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's such a battle. It's a battle that never ends. And so I relate to it really as almost like an artist fan of like, I just want you to be able to express what is most in you and to have agency in how you do that. And I just think if that happens, like, I really don't know of many things more important than that other than, just love itself. And so that is really how I am motivated. But like Kickstarter was, the draw to Kickstarter was here are all these artists that I love. David Lynch was always my go-to. And for David Lynch to make a movie, he's pitching a bunch of suits who couldn't care less about what he makes,
Mm-hmm.
or he's, having dinner with strange oil oligarchs in
Mm-hmm.
countries no one knows of, to scrap together the money. When we as fans, we are very clear on what we feel about him and his work.
Mm-hmm.
And like we will show up for him, but yet we are not invited to that table at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just this sense of like there needs to be let's there's a door that needs to exist here. We discovered, didn't know that was going to be the case, but discovered where, yeah, these people just deserve to talk to each other directly because both sides actually know what they want. And they don't need approval. They just need money, they and so, and the path to Metalabel was also very much an emotional one of me hitting this creative wall on my own and wishing for peers, thinking of my experiences at Kickstarter. And weirdly, all my favorite moments at Kickstarter were various crises. Because in those moments, you and like the seven smartest, most empathic people are trying to figure out a high pressure, intense situation. And it generally brings out the best in people. And those are, a crisis is a moment where it's one of the only moments where you're allowed to really go for ultimate truth.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about what's it going to feel like to hear whatever. No, it's just about like, how do we get as close to the truth as possible so we can figure out what needs to happen here.
Mm-hmm.
And and so that feeling of just like a bunch of minds sort of sitting in the middle together, trying of a table, trying to like crack something. It's an amazing feeling. It's like to be in those situations is really a gift, as hard as they are. It's just like you can feel that. I mean, already the idea that we are individuals is a fiction in a lot of ways, but you can feel
Mm-hmm.
the space in between is alive. And so I just wanted that feeling again.
Yeah.
And didn't want it to do it by like starting a company, but just thought like, how do I as a creative person get that? And so then, returning to the label format and thinking of that in a different way and trying to think about ways that I, as a creative person, might be aligned with another creative person and how I could feel uh, a sense of cooperation with them rather than feeling like every time they write a banger, I'm pissed. So I'm like, that should have been me. How dare
Yeah.
you? How
Yeah.
dare you have a better idea than me? And yeah, so like, how can I reorient around that? And so, but it was like that emotional pull of, I literally had a day of thinking, I'm doing everything I want to do, and I'm so unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm just not feeling it,
Mm-hmm.
not feeling it. And it's because I was alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So have you found what you were looking for? Have you found that feeling, like within Metalabel.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Definitely. Yeah, I've been cured. No, I mean,
Yeah.
it's on a daily basis, it feels like a gift to be able to work on something that just feels so true to everything I believe in and care about. That is like so esoteric and also quite audacious. And we were in the wilderness of an idea maze for a long time, and I was always certain that we were on the right path, but I couldn't really defend that position
Mm.
sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard.
But but I've also been able to experience on a again on a daily basis like how I have grown since I last sat in this chair, leading Kickstarter. And just to be able to, it feels like a gift to be able to feel one's maturity and to feel the way that, the way you process your experiences allows you to see with more clarity.
Hmm.
And I'm someone that's very called to service in a lot of different ways. And I feel a sense of service very much around this project. And we kind of the experience we're going on is molding into the exact things that I like, where right now we are really treating Metalabel as a label where we're only doing a couple of things a week, um, very choosy about what we're working with, just because, but we're only doing it based on what are we personally excited by.
Hmm.
And so I'm working directly with numerous projects as like their A&R rep, as
Hmm.
their creative thought partner, and just helping to steer them through, helping people navigate what they're experiencing. And then internally at Metalabel, we're very tight, and it's an extremely, extremely, extremely talented group of people. And we also are very committed to the idea of being very small and punching above our weight. And
Hmm.
so it's a nice, hungry energy that I believe in.
Hmm.
I think I think our journey, I am prepared to be very patient for this to be fully clear to people. I have no illusions about any fast thing. I think every project that I love and admire starts by them doing something they love, and it's just growing step by step. And that, we're going to take the long path with Metalabel, and I feel confident to where it's going to net out.
Cool. Yeah, I love to hear that. As you know, I've been a fan of Metalabel since its origins, and I'm really happy to hear that it has been able to be that space that you created it to be, for yourself. And I'm curious, because truly it's like we need more precedents and need more examples like Metalabel to sort of transcend this paradigm of of like individual thoughts, and it's going to take a long time to kind of peel that back and transition, to something that is more of a collective mindset. And I'm curious if you've started, to see examples of that happening more broadly, not just inside you, or your team, but like have you seen that shift? Has it manifested, in different ways? And if it has, I'd love to hear an example or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, if we think about Stewart Brand's pace layering, like this is the outermost layer, the slowest layer of,
Hmm.
I see a real shift in what it means to be a person and an individual, and the networked experience that we have, the collective consciousness that is the internet, is just creating a new society that will prove to be more powerful than the society that originally created it,
Mm.
which is the world before 1994, or whatever we want to say, like the web was really
Hmm.
alive. And and my feeling is that what we are doing now, although we do not realize it, is that we are forming the institutions and the norms and the social structures that might define the next 1,000 years
Hmm.
of human experience. Because I think there's going to be a pre-internet and a post-internet human experience. Like
Hmm.
the way the Victorian age feels to us now is what anything from the 1980s and earlier will feel like to the world from now on.
Hmm.
It's going to be this unimaginable, like, could you even go back?
Hmm.
And but what we're finding online is that, you know, to go online is to become re-individualized.
Right.
And what you look like, what people in your life think of you, where you're from, all those things are available for you to rewrite and revise and invent, and to do that as many times as you wish. And what's happening online is that all of our alts and all of our slices of self, there's a version of me that loves music. There's a version that could be talking about basketball. There's a version
Hmm.
that could be talking about philosophy. There are all these different versions of me that are all alive online right now,
Hmm.
congregating. Maybe two of our alts are talking right now somewhere. It's possible, right?
Yeah.
And algorithmically, they are, right? Maybe we're being fed to each other,
Hmm.
and that is so. There's this other universe where that is happening, and but what we're going to find and what we're going to do is we're going to build communal structures and institutions that are meant to provide safety, security, love, economic needs, and just basic needs in a more digital existence. And so, the way I think about the change, and so I think that we've gone from the past 2 decades, first 2 decades of the internet has been very much single player mode. Every site is oriented around a single user. I do believe that that is something that will change. I think that Metalabel is an example where our core user is like actually a group, might be a group of people doing something together.
Hmm.
And but you see this shift in, like, I think a sense of individual value is like how many followers you have. I think in this period I call it a post individual, but like post individual value is what group chats are you in? Like
Hmm.
how connected are you into who?
Hmm.
It's something like memes, I think, are a clear example of a different level of collective intelligence
Hmm.
where they are communicating in a kind of an oblique language, but that, depending on how deep your knowledge goes, you get more of the joke.
Right.
And you can have an entire conversation simply sharing not things that relate to you at all, but are just simply this shared language, these hieroglyphics almost, but that are a shared form of communication that show whether or not you belong to a certain space. And
Hmm.
so there is just these things that are being developed, I think unconsciously. They're just sort of what is connecting between us. And so I I see the like as people have gotten excited about whatever DAOs and things like that the past few years, I've always felt like those things are the smoke and not the fire. And the
Mm.
fire is this bigger way that us being invited to redefine our identity in this whole other space and just the infinite exploration space it gives our inner selves to meet. That is beyond, like, the implications of that are far beyond what we are in a position to understand, because we're just the first, guinea pigs.
Right.
But it just feels very clear to me um, that what we're doing online is going to matter in a bigger and bigger way, and that it is real life and will become to define real life even more than maybe what we've thought of as real life in the past.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I mean, taking a long-term look, what does this moment look like 1,000 years from now? What is a meta label regarded as at that point? A transition, from one, like one way of thinking and being to more collective, connective way.
I mean, Chuck Klosterman has a lot of great pieces around like how history shrinks with time. Like
Hmm.
in 100 years, how many bands are known from the 1960s? Like
Yeah.
the Faces no longer exist. The
Hmm.
Kinks probably not. The Who maybe because of car commercials. I think, like, or whatever cars are in the future.
Yeah.
100 years from now, I think like 9/11, Trump, Brexit might be all the same event. The way people look at history.
Yeah. True.
Right. And so there's just like it's interesting to see how these things get compressed and how different it looks. And uh, this is what we gain by having lived through these moments, like me saying musicians lost, ruined MySpace, versus the historical look of like, well, it's just smoothed into this very clear narrative that
Yeah.
I, as a Twitter think boy, let me tell you about this event. Twitter is just people sharing ideas around things they didn't experience before,
Mm.
sharing other people's experiences as their own.
I love that. Another hot
It's
take on another
it's
platform.
it's garbage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, and I appreciate that, long-term thinking, because not enough people do it. And yeah, we're stuck in these moments of really short-term gratification, which will destroy us all if we're not careful, and lean more into
I
this
mean,
line.
I can't justify like, spending all your time thinking long term. I'm like not that type of person.
Well,
But
it's hard to
but
be.
I think it's just interesting to, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just to have a just to have a sense in yourself of where you feel currents pulling you, and to try to look at them with a level of objectivity and just think what might be happening to me,
Mhm,
and what might be happening to other people. Like, what if my experience is not just my experience?
mhm, mhm,
And um but starting with the true emotional truth of your experience.
mhm.
And I mean, that's Metalabel. That's where Kickstarter came from. That's where, I mean, that's every project I've had has kind of come from that, of like a place of self-examination, that then you're like, is that me? Is that just me? Is it?
Yeah,
And yeah, it's an interesting process.
yeah. Yeah, there was a piece by Ted Goya that came out the other day, and it was called something like all bad like we'll forget about all bad music or something. But his point was kind of what you were saying, is that, like, how many musicians, how many artists do we actually know about and remember, like, for the past 100 years? And he, pulled up an example of like, like the 10 biggest tracks of like 1952, and like the artists attached to them. It's like, it's true. Like, I'd heard of two of them, um and kind of his point alongside that was like, the reason we remember these people are, because of the caretakers that surround them, the curators, the people who are elevating them, their champions. Like, it requires more of a collective effort to like make it into like the pantheon of human experience, I guess. And it's kind of like, it is kind of a meme in that you don't it's really difficult to predict what is going to be, collectively deemed this, thing of value that, is really touching on a point. And I mean that happens with artists who, like, they, like, no one knows about them until they die. Like, even the artist sometimes is not around to see the impact that they create. So taking more of that long-term thought, I mean, it's, kind of terrifying, but also like really humbling to think of yourself as less of an individual that needs to have a legacy and be remembered, and more a part of this thing. It's like a part of a movement, a part of this collective
It's
care.
liberating. It's liberating.
Yeah.
Don't try to be the star. Be part of a constellation.
Yeah.
Like, hot take. I think Alice Coltrane will go down in history as more important than John Coltrane.
I think I agree with that. I mean, and I'm a huge John Coltrane fan, but and
I
Alice
mean, we're
is.
peak. This is peak Alice these days. But I think that, but like, there are things like that that flip, right? There are things like that that flip. And there's a book I once read about antiquities and the classics, and it in like 400 AD something. Some monk made a list of like the best 1,000 books of all time or something. It's like the
Hmm.
Rolling Stone best albums list, but it's like in 400 AD.
Hmm.
And it was something like, of all of those texts, 22 survive today.
Wow,
22.
that's wild.
And yeah, and a lot of that is about archiving. But there's been more culture lost than remembered. And it's okay. It's all there in our DNA. It's like, it's sad, but it's things die. It's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. There's always something new. It's okay. But yeah.
Yeah, part of the natural life cycle. But that's actually a good segue into, a couple of the more specific music questions I have. And, it kind of starts with, I'm curious how you discover music, today. And I guess you already talked about historically. Yeah. So, I think really focusing on today. And if you could answer through kind of the lens of different curators and outlets and platforms that you use.
Yeah. So I'll work my way to this just, but like in 2009, I left music criticism to start Kickstarter
Mm-hmm.
and with co-founders Perry and Charles. And I was really anxious about leaving music because it's like, who am I? I'm like the music guy. I made my big mix every year, my top 10 list where, I poured over Paz and Jop every year. It was like so core. And I was worried about my relationship to music. And I did stop listening to like everything every week the way I had before. But then I just spent like almost a year straight just listening to Tusk by Fleetwood Mac and just instead of seeking knowledge, just saw it just pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wonderful. And I came to find that I loved music even more than I had before, and what a relief that was. I have Yeah, I've reached a point now where it's sad where yeah, I mean, my search for new music is very casual. Um, I do spend a lot of time looking into music, reading about music every week, but it tends to be about obscure corners and things that I really happen to like.
Mm.
And probably my best piece of media for music every week, it came this morning, is there's a record store in Vancouver called audiopile.ca. They've got a very well curated, especially free jazz noise selection. They have an email every Friday at 11 a.m. with what they're stocking that week. Things sell out fast. That's like
Cool.
appointment viewing for me. And just buying vinyl, just buying vinyl. I'm maybe buying something every couple of weeks, but like that, I really look at. And before this call, I had opened 5 tabs of records there that I was listening to and just seeing what was there. I do look at Pitchfork every day and just scan what's being reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'm just looking at album art. And if it's someone I know, I'll be like, oh, okay, they have a record. I'll maybe check that out.
Yeah.
Then I have a couple of friends that I spend time with, that will send things back and forth. I listen to zero Spotify algorithmic playlists, negative. It makes me dislike music.
Hmm.
And yeah, and then it's just a lot of like, side paths off of things I really like. But there was something interesting that the Cindy Lee record was pretty wild for me. One, it's just I love a great listenable record like that. Like I would say Cotton Jones and Electrolane are two
Mm.
groups who I think similarly put out just like
Mhm.
some people would say mid, to use our very now language, like, and who the fuck has any right to like show me your music, asshole? Um, but like just listenable, just very listenable music.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
but being forced to download the wave files of that had me open up what the application formerly known as iTunes for the first time in a long time, and soon discovered, because I hadn't thought about it, that my MP3 collection from 2009 is still there.
mhm.
And so ever since, I'm just spending all of my time listening to that, which is full of things that aren't on any streaming
Yeah.
and are just like, it feels so nice. It feels like browsing my record collection and browsing things that I intentionally have there because I loved, and things I sought out and bootlegs I grabbed. And I'm like, yeah, I think I will be done with Spotify soon. And I'm just happy to be with, YouTube plus my record collection plus MP3s. And,
Mhm,
but yeah, but music has this very strong feeling in my life these days. And, yeah, wonderful. Also, no, it's not good to say this here, but like no podcasts. Podcasts are audio internet.
Uh-huh.
It blocks you from having ideas.
Hmm.
If you want to have ideas, listen to music. If you want to just be online all the time, listen to podcasts.
There you go. Everybody, do not listen to this. If you are
Turn
listening,
this off.
turn it off.
If you're listening to this, what's wrong with you?
Go listen to
Go
Alice
listen to.
Coltrane.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Cool. I love that. All right. If you can remember, what's the first album you ever purchased, and then what is the most recent?
First album ever purchased, I believe, would be the first Mariah Carey cassette.
Nice. Cool.
Pretty sure I both bought the Visions of Love single and bought the actual cassette. Great record. Most recent is I'm trying to remember how to say the name. Astros de Colo. It's I was listening to it this morning. It's a free jazz band from Mexico City, and there's a great label in New York called Blank Forms that they put out a lot of Don Cherry stuff. He is my single favorite musician.
Oh, cool.
And this is a cassette from 1974 that they have unearthed and put out. And I saw this group perform together for the first time since then, and in an apartment last week in Brooklyn.
Oh, cool.
And it was wonderful, and the record is wonderful. But yeah, it just came out on Blank Forms, but that very nice, very satisfying.
Sweet. Love that. And check that out. All right. Who are 3 artists of note that you've heard for the first time in approximately the last year or so?
Um, I might just be so boring that it's like Cindy Lee.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sure there's more, but I feel like I'm just going deeper in my listening rather than broader.
Yeah. That's a fair answer. If anything comes to mind, let us know. Can
Yeah,
add it retroactively.
yeah.
That's right, Cindy.
Oh, sure. I would also say Time Warp.
Mm,
WHARP. She's a great avant-garde composer, electronic artist here in New York. Wonderful. Love it.
cool. Amazing. Now here's the big one. You are going to a desert island and you get to bring 3 records with you. What are they?
Um, Don Cherry live in Paris, 1973. This double record's under the title Don Cherry's New Researches. Uh, the most alive music I know in the world.
Mm,
Second one, I'll go the White Album. A lot of songs.
yeah, indeed.
The third, I'm gonna go for sure. I'm gonna go a record that I made,
Nice.
and it's my inspired by Don Cherry, who's a jazz musician who made or what he called organic music, but just like fully improvised music with his family and a lot of amazing musicians, also a lot of non-musicians. My family and I, my wife and my son is now 8. During COVID, we began making music in that same spirit and just
Cool.
like single take recording on a floor, everyone picking up instruments and just having fun. And we ended up making a couple of years ago when my kid was 6, a record where he is the vocalist on all the songs. They're all
Mm,
single take and he sings them. And I'm playing guitar and I I think it's amazing music. Like, I don't know if I've ever heard music made by a child in this exact way, but like the song, it's great. And
mm,
we listen to it often and it's just love. There's just so much love
yeah.
there, but it's like, of course I would feel this way because it's my music and my child, but it's just very pure and
Mhm,
alive in the way that like the Don Cherry album feels alive and pure to me. And increasingly that's what I look for in music, is a sense of, do I feel the heartbeat? Do
mhm.
I can I feel myself in the room? I listen mostly to live recordings.
Mm,
I also say, like, live recordings, I greatly prefer
mm,
studio 'cause it's there. That energy is there, and
yeah.
so I feel like that our band is called Cozy Cozy,
Cool.
and that's called, the Animal Sounds EP. It's on Spotify, you can
Wow.
listen. I rep for it. It's like 8 songs, 19 minutes. He is a great songwriter. There's, like, moments that you're gonna think, "How they must have practiced that." It's all just
Improvise.
he and I just sitting there together, just making it up. But yeah,
I love that.
I would listen to that and just feel grateful for life.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. I love that. Um, and seems like, a great outro to this episode. Before we go, I do ask this to all of our guests. Now that you've, been through the gauntlet, who is another music head that comes to mind that we should have on?
I mean, Brandon Stusui, creative independent, Pitchfork,
Hmm. Hmm.
managing More Mother right now.
Right.
Brandon's amazing. Um, yeah, I mean, all the whole Pitchfork crew. Amy Phillips, wonderful. Yeah,
Cool. No,
that's
that's
who I
a
think about.
good shout. Good shout. I met Brandon once at Basilica Soundscape. I don't know what year that was, 2014 or something.
I
That
think
was
I was
fun.
there. Yeah,
Cool. Yeah, I mean, they call it the Anti-Festival. I loved that. It was a lot of fun. Camped in the woods. Great time. Um, cool. Well, this has been amazing, Yancey. I really appreciate you and your time. For those listening who want to get involved in anything that you're doing, what is the best place for them to follow along?
metalabel.com, and my website is ystrickler.com.
Perfect. Cool. That's all she wrote. So that's the end of this episode. Thank you again, Yancey. It was a pleasure to get to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for being here. That's a wrap on another episode of For the Record, a conversation series with all manner of music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. It's a production of Grey Matter and a new Crate Coalition experiment in building connective listening graphs. We stamp every music mention you heard here, from musicians to venue owners to journalists to tech builders to DJs, and in the background, we're mapping these names to form those yet unseen connective threads between people. Want to get involved? You can check out our website at greymatter.fm or come hang out in the Crate Coalition Discord. See you next time.